Good afternoon. Good morning to you. Good late afternoon to some of you. My name is John Carroll. Thank you so much for joining today's in-service podcast series event. Really pleased to be joined by, man, he's becoming a good friend, Gyner Ozgul. Gyner is the CEO of Perimeter Roofing. Many of you across this industry know him from Smart Care Equipment and from all the work he's done across the service industry for many years as an advisory board member of the Service Council and in many other capacities before that, predating that. Gyner, a warm welcome to you. Happy New Year.
Thanks. Happy New Year, John. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And Happy New Year to our listening audience. I hope that you had some rest. I hope that you had the opportunity to rejuvenate that battery, recharge that battery, and enter 2024 with vigor. I feel refreshed myself. We had the opportunity to take the kids skiing, and there wasn't much skiing being done in New England. It was a little bit mild, as it has been across the nation, but we played a lot of bingo and other games, Trivia Pursuit and other things. And if we have time, we might do some useless trivia at the end of it. Gyner and I were
Okay,
just
yeah.
planning here.
It's always fun.
Well, outstanding. So thank you for joining. We're going to jump into today's discussion, a really important one. You think about talent planning, talent management, becoming a next generation service leader, career pathing, all the opportunities to be an innovative, thoughtful, mindful service leader. What does that mean today? What does it mean to be a next generation service leader? And I thought it was really cool to plug in with someone that's kind of rode the ranks and just recently rode the ranks even further in a new post. And Gyner is going to be a great sort of charter of today's discussion, if you will. But before we jump into it, today's podcast is being recorded. You can access it on whatever podcast channel you subscribe to. It will be available on our website for consumption as well. And for those of you on LinkedIn Live, thank you for joining us. We welcome your conversation. So if you want to react, if you'd like to submit a question to Gyner, Gyner has promised to do his best to read and react to those questions and give his best response. And I'll hopefully supplement his response as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Gyner, I know you. A lot of people know you. You are Mr. Popular, but how can we introduce you to others that might not know you yet? You personally, a little bit about your journey, and then we'll get
Yeah.
into your current company and your new role.
Yeah. So, Gyner Ozgul, as John mentioned, CEO of Perimeter Roofing. Most of you know me as a former executive of a business called Smart Care, which is a commercial kitchen repair, a nationwide commercial kitchen repair platform company. Started off as a food service worker back when I was 16 years old. I got a job in a Burger King as a kid who, both parents were immigrants, didn't have very much money, had to find a job where I could walk to it and walk home because we only had one car and Dad used that car. So from that 31 years ago to CEO now, I'm very humbled by that journey, but I spent the first, John said, the first 10 years I spent in food service. Started as an early employee, as I mentioned. I left the Burger King world as a regional director of operations back in 2003. I joined a business in 2003 called GCS, which would eventually become Smart Care, but it was a business division within a company called Ecolab.
Sure.
At the time. I was the service manager for 12 technicians in the city of Chicago. So giving everyone a little perspective about our journeys, and we'll talk more with John about that. But essentially, 12 service technicians and, leaving Smart Care to become the CEO here, was really proud to leave that team with, well over 1,200 technicians and a nationwide company servicing roughly 90% of the population, right? Currently, my role is at Perimeter Roofing. We are building a nationwide platform of roofing repair for residential homes. One of our most important investments for all of us, right? Not only is the home an investment, but the people that live within it. So we have a lot of passion around our mission here to go do something special and build a nationwide company that provides value for roofing repair.
That's outstanding. I got two questions. One, a little bit of jest. Can you confirm, was it a brown station wagon?
It was not a brown station.
Okay. All right. I feel like everybody in my youth had a brown station wagon.
Although I will say, my best friend's brother, Todd is my best friend. He's been my best friend for over 30 years. His brother owned a blue station
Ah,
wagon, and we have plenty of stories about the blue station.
outstanding. Secondarily, and more importantly, Perimeter Roofing, right? You're entering a new company
Yeah.
with excitement, and congratulations, by the way. You and I talked about the pride and with your family immigrating and your conversation you had with your father, and
Yeah.
I just want to applaud you on achieving this milestone in your personal life, because I know how special and important that is for you. Um, what are you entering? What is the
Mm.
culture? Talk a little bit more about Perimeter Roofing in terms of the opportunity as you saw it.
Yeah, the perimeter was founded by Todd Price. You can look him up on social media. He's very he's awesome. I mean, you look up his posts. He's very passionate about what he does here at Perimeter Roofing. He's also very passionate about health and fitness, and he's very passionate about building successful cultures in his business. Right. So,
Cool.
very similar. Trek to Mine started from basically nothing, and then built
Yeah.
this business up. And I met Todd and his two partners, Lance and Ray, and we had some initial conversations, and it was really interesting. And I knew the private equity partner, Sawmill Capital,
Wonderful.
and they wanted to build something special, a business that can help provide homeowners with a single source solution for roofing repair, especially as there's a lot of tailwinds in the roofing industry or the housing industry in general right now, with
Sure thing.
prices going up and the inflationary impact of cost of goods and people trying to make their investments and keep onto them for longer periods of time because of interest rates. Like, all those things are actually very positive tailwinds for a business like ours.
Yeah.
And we're really excited about the opportunity to go build something. And, within 10 months, Perimeter started as the business out of Georgia. And in a very short period of time before my joining, the business has gone from, has done 3 acquisitions. So it's a total of 4 companies now that covers about 10 states.
Great.
Very shortly, going to be 5 companies covering 12 states by the end of
Awesome.
January. So super exciting.
Awesome. Cool. Congratulations once again. And to our listening and participating audience, good afternoon and good morning to you and everyone as well. Roy Dockery, thank you for joining and listening. We hope you participate. We know you're not shy, so we expect you to participate. Let's go ahead and get into the topic du jour. So, being a next generation service leader, what does that mean to you, Gyner? Can you share with us a sort of a foundational sort of understanding of what are the elements that make you a next generation service leader?
It's interesting about our next generation has, like, for me personally, it's like 2 things. One is, we have the challenges of hiring the labor workforce, and a lot, in service, but also just in general, is very constrained.
Yeah.
Right? We're all challenged for talent, and where we find it, and how do we recruit them, how do we onboard them and train them and retain them and build cultures, winning cultures around it. So, like, one is the talent piece. The second is, culture has gone from being a buzzword 20 years ago for me to something that's real in organizations that your employees look for, right? So whether that be your social mission and how your conviction around that, or whether that's the work that you actually do, you have to center yourself around what the culture of your organization is going to look like. And between the people side of this and the culture side of this, I think as a next generation service leader, we really have to pay a lot of consideration to that and make that tangible for our teams if we're going to be successful as an organization.
Outstanding. And we're going to get into the investments that you made in terms
Mhm.
of rounding out your capabilities of building your approach to hiring and talent, and building your approach to technology, and building your approach to culture and all the good things. So for our listening audience, we're going to get to what comprises those elements that Gyner highlighted here. Let's first, though, go back a little bit. You
Mhm.
mentioned your first job in all the way back at McDonald's or Burger King,
Burger
excuse
King,
me,
yeah.
and then managing 12 in Chicago. If I could put you back in those shoes, right,
Mhm.
for a moment, What was more important to you, the onboarding experience, having a well-defined career path, removing friction from your day-to-day job? Can you talk a little bit about what you felt when you entered the profession, and how has that changed to modern day, what you're experiencing with your workforce and team now?
Yeah, I'll kind of defer to the service uh, job I had at GCS because it's probably most relevant to this
Sure,
conversation.
sure.
In my onboard experience, and George Kennedy, who's retired now, a dear friend of mine. This isn't a shot at him; it's kind of a statement of the culture. 20
Sure,
plus years ago,
sure.
I walked in and he was moving on to a new project within the organization. I got the keys branch and a couple of binders with customer lists and said, your onboarding experience and kind of figure it out and call me if you need something, right? Um, and fortunately, he was really good to get a hold of on our old Nextel two-way radios, so I could buzz him and ask him questions. But that was the onboarding experience at the time, and I remember for myself saying, like, "Wow, I mean, this feels very painful." Like that, the me of that time saw that as very painful. The me of today says, that was an experience, and
Yeah,
it had a lot to do with building a foundation of who I am now,
yeah,
right? This whole idea of not relying on someone to give me a solution, but going to figure out the solution on my own.
yeah.
Um, I think it built that into me in the thought process of, hey, how do you think around corners and how do you think to solve for that? And, I remember grabbing the binder like day 3 and calling my dispatcher and just going to visit customers and technicians because I didn't know any better, right? I
Sure.
was comfortable in the kitchen because of my Burger King days, so that didn't bug me. But I was like, if I'm going to learn this business, I'm just going to go out and see customers and techs. And I spent 6 months pretty heavily out in the field just learning the business
Outstanding.
so that I could resonate with it.
That's outstanding. I love it. Immersive experience. It's kind of like when you learn a new language, what's the best way? Just immerse yourself in the culture, right? So I love it. Let's get into some of the areas that you used in terms of investment in yourself to get
Mm.
to the leader that you are today. So can you talk a little bit about technical training, education, maybe even some of the things you've done for soft skills or mental health and wellness, which is becoming a really important topic over the last several years, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I put myself through college. There's a lot of debate on whether college is useful or not. I won't get into that debate. At the time that I was going to school, it was useful. I was an immigrant son, and I was trying to get myself educated so that I can compete in the world that was evolving around me. So,
Sure,
depending on what your end state was, my end state was to be a professional and grow in my profession. So college resonated for me.
sure,
I had weaknesses in communication and finance at the time, and I knew the only way for me to figure that out was to get an education around it. So that was the goal. Since then, I've gotten several certifications, Microsoft certifications, really understand their platform and how their programs integrate with each other. I was fortunate to implement SAP back in my Ecolab days and spent a lot of time on things like SAP. And because of that, I learned waterfall and agile processes
hmm
in terms of project management. I decided to go back to school after those experiences at Ecolab and formalize my MBA with a concentration in project management specifically because it was interesting. I really liked that. I like the complexity of kind of building projects and going to solve complex things.
sure,
Um, and then, while I was at Ecolab, I took an opportunity to work within their Lean Six Sigma program and train to be a black belt and run a few projects there. Ran supply chains. So, I'll deviate for a second and say
yeah,
what I learned in that journey was I wanted to do more because I wanted to learn more,
yeah,
right? And at some point around 2010, I had a little bit of an internal epiphany that said, the more I push myself to learn new things, the more the skills of my personal repertoire will expand and I'll be more successful. So as long as I don't kind of constrain myself to kind of one silo and doing one thing really, really well, which there's nothing wrong with that if you're happy with it. So I don't
sure,
want to, but that wasn't something that I resonated with personally.
yeah,
I decided to kind of move around, hence moving to perimeter roofing, which we'll talk about a little later.
yeah,
So did a lot of that. In parallel, I got a professional coach back in about 2016, 2017. He's out of the Twin Cities. Great. I still talk to him. He's actually going to be helping me here at Perimeter with facilitating some team meetings coming up.
Great.
And, the reason I did the professional coach thing was it was important for me to have an outside advisor that didn't have the confirmation biases of working with me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They could be critical of me. They could offer advice. They could teach me different ways of communicating or better ways of communicating with team members, employees, and peers. So it was really beneficial for me because that was a skill I didn't know I needed until I had the added benefit of having a coach.
Absolutely.
And then, most recent for me was, you mentioned mental health, and a lot of folks don't talk about therapy for many reasons. I understand that. But I'm proud to say that I've had a therapist for a number of years. It's very beneficial to my mental health well-being. Like the coach, it provides a similar unbiased view of your world around you. And it helps you with the relationships you're trying to build personally and how to not get yourself into a little bit of a looking glass where you don't see the outside of it and how the people around you are perceiving you and how you should improve your communication for them as well.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you for the personal disclosure. I applaud that. That's encouragement. The stigma is lifted on mental health, and it's actually something to applaud. So I think that's outstanding. Let's get into role models, right? We all have our role models. Can you name 3 role models that have influenced your life and why?
Yeah. So this one's going to sound cliche, but it's not. Albert Einstein early on as a kid, and not so much for all the brilliant things he did.
Sure.
That was, people think about him as a brilliant guy. If you really read about him, what you learn about him is there's a lot of like tragedies that he had to like overcome as a person, right?
Yeah.
Being part of the Holocaust and immigrating to the U.S., having his perception of how he was used for the development of the nuclear bomb, and some of the mental health issues that caused him, like this brilliant person, was outsmarted in so many different ways by people that you would consider less smart than him, right?
Sure.
And he had to deal with the outputs of that, and he carried a lot of guilt. And reading up on him is just fascinating, to me, and it's very inspirational. The human side of him was very inspirational to me.
Cool.
So he was one. The second one was my dad. And, for a very unique reason, my dad emigrated to the States in the early 70s. Worked in food service because really that's what it was, right? When you came to the States, you were like a dishwasher or a line cook or something like that. And, my dad was able to, kind of come to the States, as he said, with a duffel bag and 2 T-shirts and a pair of jeans, right, from Istanbul. And, have his son now today sit in front of here, like very humble to be on this interview and talking about my CEO role. I think he did a lot of things right with our family and instilling values and how we think about things, and essentially how I treat money with myself, how I treat people, and and how I remain humble and during that whole process, right? So that came from my dad. So that was second. Third for me was, it's interesting. I'm a Chicago Bears fan, and we joked around a little bit about it earlier. But I took an affinity to Mike Ditka when I was a kid because they won the '85 Super Bowl, right?
Oh, here it goes. He's rubbing it. He's rubbing it into a New England Patriots fan. Go ahead.
I forgot, what was it, 46-10 or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But when as I got a little older, and learned more about him as a player, evolving into a coach, and carrying the weight of that legacy from Hallis and being this great player that everybody knew in Chicago, and now having like the weight of that expectation and how he had to deal with it and actually carry that through a championship and several like winning seasons in Chicago. Like that was very inspirational to me too, right? It's the whole player coach thing. It's the whole, how do you play to win? How do you develop, Hall of Fame caliber players on your team, right? So it wasn't, if you think about, you fast forward 30, 40 years, we're talking about, John Harbaugh, who people forget played on the Bears during, Ditka's tenure, or Singletary, who played, all those players were around when Mike Ditka was the coach, right? And they've all moved on to be very successful in their own careers. And I'm not saying it's all a one-for-one direct attribution to him, but I don't think it also happens by pure coincidence, right? So there's some level of inspiration there, and I'd say he'd be the third person.
Outstanding. Let's get into being a great service leader, navigating an organization and culture, which you're immersed in right now in your new post, and establishing cross functional, hurdling some of those cross functional collaboration barriers is oftentimes a real big challenge. In fact, it's the number 3 internal challenge according to the early returns on the Service Leaders Agenda survey that's currently in market. If you're a service leader, look for that on our website. Please take the survey. How have you successfully navigated and enabled the cross-functional collaboration that's required, where it's like not services just parked over here, sales and operations parked over here, it's one company and integrated? How have you done that in your career?
Yeah. My greatest success is you always have to lead with what your vision is. So as a, for instance, here, I'm working to develop kind of an initial view of, well, I'll call a value creation plan or strategy plan for the overall business. And then you have to take that plan and kind of sit with all the functions together, the leaders of those functions, and say, here's how I'm thinking about the business. Help me make this better. Help me change it. Help me take things off the plate that you think are wrong. Because I'm open to that type of feedback, right? But you have to have everybody in the room to collaborate. And the ground rules around that, so you set the vision, and then you collaborate with the teams, and then you gain agreement with the team on, hey, once we leave the room, this is the set of priorities that we all agree is important to the success of this business, right? That's why we're doing this exercise. And then it's their plan, not my plan. So then when new items are introduced or friction between those silos starts to happen, I refer back to them. And I say, hey, we were in a room together. We all agreed on how we're going to communicate and that this is our strategy. And you're violating tenets of what we agreed to as a team, right? So my accountability isn't necessarily to the plan right now. It's the fact that you're violating a tenet of agreement, right? For you to work with each other. And so that's kind of the hard side. On the soft side, I'm a very live communicator. I had a rule for many years for the managers that reported to me that said, once the email hits 3, like 3 reply, a third reply, it probably means you should get on the phone and talk about it, right? So the communication is starting to break down where this is becoming an email string. So live communication, I still believe that's one of the most powerful things we have as human beings, is to be able to communicate with each other live. Because then, and then ask a lot of questions when you're communicating live, right? Because you need to learn, you need to ask to understand before you can start solving. Because people jump to my history tells me I have the answer right away, versus let me understand what the problem is I'm trying to solve, and really use my history and collaboration to actually solve it the right way.
Absolutely. Leave it all in the field, right? Get it all out there. Let's go into another important dynamic of being a next generation service leader, and that is the approach to technology. Digital transformation has dominated the topic and discussion for a number of years now. What's your view on technology? Do you want to be an early adopter, a trailblazer, or a fast follower? What's your approach? Is it kind of?
I think, I don't know that I think I want to be a fast follower that trailblazes thinking about it differently. So what I'll say is, I like the technology itself to evolve to a point, but then I like to step back and say, how can I make that different or better or unique, right? So data is going to unlock a lot of value in this business. And for those of you who don't believe it or think it's a blinking light, you're going to get left behind. It's just, I'm just going to be really clear on it. whether or not you look at something like as simple as ChatGPT, and if you've not used it, you should. And the brilliance of a tool like that will tell you what the power of data will be very shortly in our industry. So I like to think of it as an example. ChatGPT is out there, so I'm starting to put together use cases of how I can use AI that's unique to the roofing industry. So those are the things that we're going to have to think about as service leaders going forward.
Absolutely, 100%. And so let's build on that technology track if we could, or thread if we could.
Sure.
As the service leader, what was your level of involvement in the technology decision, the transformation? Was it something that you led, supported? Yeah. So talk a little bit about your participation or your philosophy in terms of
Yeah,
how
so
you wanted to participate.
at SmartCare, I oversaw all of our IT and technology
Yeah.
operations for a number of years. So I pushed a lot on the data transformation of the business, and that's something I had a lot of passion around.
Sure.
Especially specific to the asset management and life cycle of
Yep.
equipment.
Yep.
Because you're talking about equipment for commercial clients that's a big investment. Essentially, they're amortizing it over a long period of time. So you need to help them with the asset management of that. So
Yep.
I really was a very strong proponent of the data side and overseeing that. And what came with that is the evolution of tools of thought, right? So, it was, initially it was PowerPoints and spreadsheets and access databases and BAs putting things together manually. It
Sure.
evolved to, as I was leaving, we were on a Power BI stack with a Snowflake back end that had aggregated probably 30 or so back office systems into kind of a data space that now we could develop and hone both internally. One use case is the internal driving the value back to the business and seeing opportunities to improve and thrive with your efficiencies within your business. And then externally providing that value to customers with asset management reporting.
Love it. Love it. And so that's your experience. Is that something you would suggest next generation service leaders embrace similarly?
Yeah, and what I'd say in my journey is like a couple of things. One, yes, you should overall embrace the data and the technology because whether you like it or not, it's going to force its way into service.
Yep.
Check. But it can seem very overwhelming. So start small, right? So start networking with people that are in the technology space. There's plenty of wonderful ones out there, and they're always willing to help. When you see demo opportunities online, take them. Even if they don't seem relevant, you'll learn something, you'll take it away. That's what I've done a lot of.
Sure.
I sit in on a lot of technology demos. And the other thing I would say is think about a very clear, narrow set of use cases within your business or your relevancy and service, and focus on how you can drive value either to the business or to your customer, and go do that. So really define the requirements of that, really define the outputs of what it'll deliver, and then you'll have a better trajectory to go learn from. Don't try to solve the data thing. I mean, the example I gave you of access databases, Excel and BAs to Snowflake and BI took years of evolution. So I just want to be really clear to take your time with it and start small and learn something about it, and don't be afraid to fail fast.
Outstanding. Let's get into the permeation of that service culture across a larger organization. So, what were some of the approaches that you took to get a culture of service where it was felt all the way down to the front line, right? Were there rewards and recognitions programs? Were there obviously a healthy amount of communication? You talked about that.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about what steps you took to make sure that that was instilled across the company at a company wide level.
Yeah, we looked at our the output is always the turnover. What does turnover tell you about your organization and what you need to improve and where?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So then, using the turnover and kind of backing into it, we went all the way back to the hiring process. how do we improve the manager's interaction or the recruiter's interaction in the hiring process to bring on the right candidate that fits your culture and your skill need that you have in the organization. Then a really defined onboarding process of training, especially in skilled trades. You have to have that defined, right? So we made it a rule a couple years ago, as an example, at SmartCare, that our district field trainers, who are technicians themselves, were not the managers, were the only ones that could approve a new technician going out into the field to complete service after their initial training was.
So I'm sorry, did I hear that correctly? It's peer approved?
Peer approved.
Wow. Okay.
We went to peer approved.
That's cool.
Yeah, we were about a year and a half into it, but we went to peer and approved. That was really important throughout the onboarding process. And then, of course, you have to show them a clear path of career advancement. They want to know that they're part of an organization where they can get ahead. We had several technicians grow from being just technicians, which there's nothing wrong with, to master level of district field trainers within the technician silo, move on to be trainers of different levels within the organization. And some of them actually moved on to become successful service managers themselves. So, you have to show them a path to success and a path to grow, because that's what, as human beings, that's a basic need for all of us. We all want to grow. So they're no different. If you can show them that, then they believe in the culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of our predictions. We'll be holding a webinar in about a week about the top 10 predictions for this year. And one of them is that we've talked about removing friction from the day-to-day and how that's important in employee satisfaction and sentiment. Another really critical, and we would argue is more critical, is that onboarding, career pathing, creating that pathway for them to get sticky with the organization and to feel part of it.
And if I can offer like 2 seconds of advice on that, we're all constrained with the workforce shrinking and the turnover we're dealing with in the post kind of COVID environment. I don't know that's totally calmed down yet. Don't shortchange your team on onboarding. It's easy to do, but you pay for it in the long run, and it doesn't do your culture any favors, and it doesn't do that new employee any favors. Just don't do it. Kind of muscle through the challenges of working through the team that you got and give that person a great onboarding experience. Long term, it's best for everyone.
Absolutely. And it's a cautionary tale, because one of the things that we saw in our KPIs and metrics benchmark survey was that the number 3 metric within the employee class, completely out of nowhere, is time to value. And how can we expedite that quicker because of capacity issues? Well, to your point, don't shortchange the onboarding experience. Make it celebratory. Make sure you go through the rigor. And we did have some applaud on your peer-led program in terms of the approval of someone getting in field. Thank you, Roy. I agree. It's a great point. We did have a question. Thank you to our now participating audience. We have from Joseph here, great stuff. What would you consider the most important non-technical training you provide your service teams?
Soft skills.
Yeah.
Everybody's good at a technical role. And when I say soft skills, don't immediately people will leap to the soft skills with our technicians who are in front of our customers. And that's definitely a checkbox. And that's something we've done here the last couple of years. We put in place. I'd also say soft skills in general between your teams, right? Be the facilitator of that. Force the conversations. Like don't play the mom and dad thing where they come to you and they go to somebody else. Say, hey, let's get that person on the phone. Let's all talk about this as a group, because I don't want to be the intermediary. So really focus on like that communication and the soft skills of both to the customer and internally amongst your teams.
Outstanding. Some of the things additionally that we've heard from other members is the importance of service financials, right? So not that they need to have an MBA in finance, but they need to understand, the impact of utilization to the business, the impact of being profitable, and how much the service function can be a function of customer retainment. And there's all sorts of things that can be taught in terms of the financial aspect of what they do and how it's important.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. One of that utilization term kind of triggered a thought. Of course, utilization is used kind of as a financial metrics in service businesses, with billed versus paid time. And But what I'll offer up to everyone to start to think about the service leaders on the phone is utilization is evolving to something different. In labor constrained workforces, where we're all trying to find new labor to fill capacity that demand that exceeds the capacity we all have. Utilization is also how do I use the labor force I have today better so that I can get to more customers with the same labor force, right? So really changing the narrative on that from a billable, profitable discussion to more of a how do I get in front of more customers with the constrained labor workforces that I have today.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So it's rethinking, what does utilization mean? What does it do? What is the outcome from that? And it is the ability to repurpose the same staff against other customer problems. And if you can think things down, we've heard a lot about subordination of the service experience and, looking at mundane tasks being treated by level 1 versus level 3 on the more sophisticated issues. But I like that. That's a cool one. And thank you, Joseph. And just as a quick plug, we're going to be producing a 3 or 4 part series, depending on where the content lands, with a gentleman who's a long time friend and collaborator, Ron Giantini. He's really smart guy around service financials. It's called Mastering Service Financials. We'll look at how do you create a better relationship with the CFO. We'll look at how do you build a portfolio management strategy. How do you design your balance sheet in terms of advanced services contracts or outcome-based services contracts. So it's going to be a cool series, and that will be coming about here in the next 1 to 2 months. So stay tuned for that content coming about. We have another question, it seems. Dennis O'Toole has plugged in. Thank you, Dennis. Welcome. Happy New Year. Do you have any service organizations that you admire enough to mention? I think of companies like CAT and John Deere. How about you?
I'm going to lean into a couple, right?
Sure.
Obviously, there's a confirmation bias of my smart care team. I still admire them a lot. They're going to be family to me for many, many years to come. So,
absolutely.
But stepping outside of that, we were talking. John and I were talking briefly earlier about Michael Ganlin and the Coca-Cola team and the service organization they have over there.
Absolutely.
Just thinking about Coke, the brand, and everything we take for granted. The amount of sheer work and effort they have to put in to execute on that type of pressure in that brand, I think is very commendable and interesting to understand. Also, there is a friend of mine, Ken Reamer, who started a little business called Ken's Beverage, which is now part of Pentair.
Sure.
Ken did a guy in Chicago who put together a business that became a nationwide beverage business. And you take for granted that Ken's business was in a lot of the Burger Kings, McDonald's, and Taco Bells of the world, fixing all that equipment that we look at. So, those two organizations really kind of resonate with me because one of them is just a brand behemoth and the pressure that comes with that. Another one is like just seeing an operator develop something from day one in Chicago to a national business that now is owned by Pentair, which is a very large company that does water filtration. It's remarkable to me.
Absolutely. Cheers. I love it. Let's get back on track on our planned Q&A here. We're going to keep going. So culture of care, culture of service. Mm-hmm. What about culture of innovation? What have you done? What sort of programs have you executed to build and cultivate a culture of innovation?
Yeah, we hit on the data a little bit a little while ago. Obviously, the data was there from an innovation standpoint. We were also very focused on things like safety. Sure. Innovation is safety. You're talking about skilled trades, so keeping them safe and keeping them working is really important. So doing things like telematics, which today is just common fodder for all of us. 10, 15 years ago was a cultural shift to bring everybody on from a telematics standpoint. Building training programs that have LMSs assigned to them. Sure. In service trade industry so that you have repeatable process. Was also innovation for us. So you have to show that ability to go continue to innovate and do things differently. Sure. For our businesses, because our team members deserve that, and our employees, they look to us for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned a culture of safety. Can we build on that? What sort of
Sure.
programs do you institute around employee care? How have you sort of built a foundation of, or a platform for this element of employee care that is obviously critical in terms of retention and engagement and
Yeah,
alignment?
so safety has a couple of components. For the technician level, it has like two basically. One is
Okay.
injury, one is driving,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And on the injury and driving side, providing them free access or easy access to PPE and
Yep.
actually doing recurring training around PPE so that they don't get injured and they're on job site safe, and developing a standard of what that means too. And
Sure.
then doing spot checks or field visits in order to make sure that they're actually adhering to those safety standards. That
Absolutely.
essentially is a little bit of a virtuous cycle you need to build from the safety standpoint. And then in the driving, using things like telematics and measuring things like heart braking and speeding and consistency of that of technicians and behaviors,
Yep.
and giving them that feedback, which is not easy feedback to give. I'm just
Sure.
being clear to say that, hey, you drove 10 miles over for a long period of time. That's risky. You have to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Past that, it's the safety of talking to employees about all of that. So we had a cybersecurity month at SmartCare in October, right?
Cool.
And we overlooked the safety of cybersecurity in our organization. So we use that as a proxy to say, this isn't only about the organization, it's about teaching you cybersecurity for yourself personally and the value that that provides back.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is safety, right? Teaching them about not clicking on harmful links and teaching them about not downloading weird apps off the internet that hack their phones. Like that educational process and that safety process is innovative. And what you're doing
Sure.
is giving them life skills, not just things that benefit your company.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And we had a comment from Sylvester Johnson from the Home Depot. That's another brand that we can be proud of.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining, Sylvester. Outstanding insight, Geener. Will this full session be available for viewing? Would like to share it with leadership. Yes, it will be. So you can access it at the Service Council's website, on LinkedIn, or whatever podcast channel you subscribe to. Thanks for joining, Sylvester. Happy New Year. Let's get back to it. Let's go into reading. I was talking
Yeah.
and planning. My daughter's a big reader, and she's like the go-to. She's like the first draftee when we're playing Trivia Pursuit as a family, which we did a lot of over the Christmas holiday because we were doing no skiing. It's too mild. All rain. But and I heard that you're one of those useless trivia knowledge guys as well. And I'm sure that has been acquired from all the education and things you talked about, but also reading is probably a big function of that acquisition of knowledge. Many famous people, Warren Buffett, Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, they read countless books a year.
Mhm.
Are you a big reader? And what are you reading now? And what have you read that you reread and go back to because it's become, in a way, your Bible?
Um, am I a big reader? Yes. I'm not reading now just because I'm on a holiday break, so that'll stop shortly. So, authenticity is important in these things. Um,
Absolutely.
what I read last year, there is a author, Brene Brown. I think the
Yeah.
book's name. I'm going to give a little bit of color on the title. I may get it not quite right, but it's called The Power of Vulnerability,
Yeah.
which is not a typical business success book. But what she really builds into this book is helping you understand how you relate to people at a personal level,
Sure.
and you unlock value within your organization by thinking about how you talk about your authentic self to the people that you work with. So that book for me resonated. I read that I think last year at some point.
Outstanding.
Actually, I reread it last year, and I read it a couple of years ago during COVID, to remind myself of some of the concepts in the book. What I go back to often, actually, it's funny. It's The Art of War by Zhu is the author. I love that book. Loved that book since I was in college, and the reason is it's fascinating to me the strategy that comes out of books like that.
Yeah.
The book itself is also it's a great read, right? So it's a
Sure.
very book, but it's a really great read. What's important for me is I revisit the book every once in a while because it teaches me about how people have thought about strategy for thousands of years in the
Sure.
not necessarily just business strategy, but this is very tactical strategy.
Yeah.
Within kind of the war ranks in China, right? And you learn a lot about how they think about it. And for me, that becomes very applicable to how I think of things as a leader
Sure.
and how you motivate people, how do you build plans of strategy that people can get behind and then go
Yep.
execute on.
Yep.
So that book usually makes a full circle with me every 3 to 5 years.
Cool. Love it. Love it. We have many authors across our community: David Noor, Relationship Economics; Ron Kaufman, Uplifting Service Cultures. We have a new one joining the mix this year, who will be a keynote at David Rogers on digital transformation. He's a real digital transformation expert. He's written books. He'll be signing it at next year's symposium as one of our opening keynote, actually. But the one that I go back to is the experience economy. Joe Pine and Jonathan Gilmore wrote it in 1999, and it's still so relevant and so incredibly important. So that's just one on my list that I go back to often and look at the highlights and pull out some quotes every now and then. So
Yeah, since you bring up the reading, what I'll say is reading has been an evolution for me as a
sure.
person, right? You know, you're in college, you read a lot of college books, right? I
Yep.
was a
Yep.
liberal arts major. Then you get into your professional career, and early on, you're reading things from, Covey and Fred Pryor, and you're trying to get your organizational basic leadership skills in place.
Sure.
As I've gotten older, I think what helps me professionally also helps me personally.
Sure.
So I do a lot of reading of what I'll call books that help unlock the value of me as a person.
Cool.
Right. So really thinking about that is more important to me to read about and say, okay, if I read this book, how does it apply to me personally, and can I apply it at work and help develop a better culture?
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's get into defining success. Okay. So we're going to skip one question here in our planning. Uh, Can you talk about how do you utilize metrics? We just wrapped up our KPIs and metrics benchmark survey. We saw that on average, service leaders are adopting 17 metrics. Yeah, right. That's what I said. And some of the critical metrics are some of the ones we know, but there's this whole shift from you know uh, uh, effect measurements to causal in nature metrics, right? So
Right.
what's causing the outcome? So that was one of the trends that came out of that. What do you look at in terms of metrics? What are some of your go-tos? And
Yeah.
how do you define success?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 17, by the way, the 17 isn't unreasonable. When I made that statement, I need to be a little clarifying for ourselves because we had a
Yeah.
dashboard too.
Sure.
We called it performance track, and it went from the technician up to kind of the managerial level. But what we did is we said to ourselves, what are the 5 to 6 metrics we want to weight that are most important to the business and drive the most impact to results? And
Hmm.
what are the rest of the metrics we just want to keep our eye on that are unscored, right? So we
Yep.
weight all of these to 100%, these 5 or 6 metrics, and these 10 other, or using your example, these 11 other metric or ancillary metrics we need to just understand within the business, right? Because there is a little bit of a domino correlation with some of these metrics.
Yep.
So that's how we looked at performance track. And I've done that in the past.
Yep.
I am, I guess my thought process is starting to evolve a little bit to kind of leading and lagging metrics,
Sure.
right? Because we measure lagging really well in industries.
Yeah.
We think about the 5, 10, 17 metrics that are all what I'll call the news after it happens,
Sure.
right? But what we don't do enough as leaders is say, what are the input metrics we need to think about upstream that
Yeah.
drive those outputs and what we're wanting to change, right? So if you want to make utilization better, then are you measuring travel time of your technicians in between jobs up front, right? Leading, lagging,
Yep.
right? And really getting people to have that type of thought process. And, even here in the roofing world, just having some initial conversations with the team here, just a few weeks in, the whole idea of pipeline development and conversion process of roofs and what gets in the way of our customers actually buying the roof versus changing their mind, and measuring that is really important for us because it helps us determine how we need to run the business differently or better.
Outstanding. Love it. Love that conversation. We're going to have to welcome you back midpoint of the year and dive into that one. I love it. So let's get into, becoming, achieving what you've achieved in your career. You've encountered many success moments and many pitfall scenarios. What can you share with our listening audience in terms of, some of those, you talked about the successes. Let's go to the pitfall, the negative
Yeah.
stuff. What can we avoid? What are some of the, oh gosh, there's a divot in the ground. You got to jump over that one.
Yeah, depending on where you are in your career, here's what I'll say. You're all going to work for a bad manager, supervisor, leader at some point. Don't beat yourself up about it too much.
Yeah.
We all have, I have, right?
Yep.
That's it's a great narrative until I tell you the kind of the pitfalls of the narrative, having a couple bad managers in there.
Yep.
What do you learn from that? Right. And, I had a band manager at one point and I felt really constrained in my role in my career. And what I said to myself was, I walked away at some point in that conversation with myself and I said, I own me and I own my success, right? This person doesn't. They don't have control over that. So what can I do differently going forward to do that? So this is where the idea of me interacting with peers and learning about technology and how to have a better service organization, how I could sell, how I could run supply chains, all the above came from prefaces of having a really bad manager who I felt was constraining my success and me saying to myself, well, what can I do differently about me so that I don't feel like this anymore or ever again, right? So that was a pitfall. I beat myself up about having a bad manager and thought that would be problematic for me. The other pitfall is, you're going to make mistakes and learn to identify them and don't beat yourself up about
it. Yeah.
You just don't. It's something that we all do. It's human nature to be very disappointed with the lack of success on initiatives. There were dozens of initiatives that failed that I tried. Dozens. But with failure came an opportunity for me to learn something and also teach the team something we shouldn't do going forward, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I would say, embrace the failures, try to get them out of your system faster. Usually that they're failing. The metrics tell you, and quantitatively, the metrics tell you, your gut tells you qualitatively. Usually when those two things are aligned, it's a pretty good sign that it's not working. So don't try to force it.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And we did have a couple comments here. We had Nick Cribb applaud the discussion and expressing his excitement to visit with you in Georgia soon, and your impact in the roofing industry. He expects to be just as much as it has been in the food service space. So thanks for joining, Nick. Thanks for the contribution. And Roy Dockery loves The Art of War by Sun Tzu as well. I think I read that in college at one point as well. So, well, wonderful. Let's close out the conversation then with you've been a board member of the Service Council. I've personally enjoyed just our colleague relationship and you steering me in many ways in many of our conversations. But what sort of value do you receive from the Service Council's affiliation, and how has it helped you in terms of doing what you do?
Yeah, networking obviously is really important in the Service Council. And if you are part of the Service Council, whether you're on the board or not on the board, part of the broader council, network. There are brilliant people, very smart people that can help you with a lot of challenges that you might be facing in your organization. So please network with the Service Council. Second is access to information like this. Right, these podcast series are very valuable. You have an opportunity to have reach with experts that work in different industries, and you get to hear how consistent our challenges are amongst a lot of different industries. So you're not as unique as you might think, and you're not also as alone as you might think. So use the opportunity to listen to these experts, take something away from it. And third for me is just like the amount of knowledge that I pull out of those meetings is always fascinating. I always go in there and I say, there are 2 to 3 tidbits I try to give myself that I'm going to write down in those meetings, right? And then I walk away with that and I try to go drive it out. And again, remember my fail fast from a few minutes ago? And I just like, I'll take those 2 or 3 things and go run the course with them. And either all 3 work, none work, a few of them work. But I'm like, I want to learn more about that. I want to
Absolutely.
understand how it could be applicable for myself.
Absolutely. I love it. Yep. And let's get to our last question, just getting to know you a little bit better. And for our listening audience, eh, Gyner, you can run, but you can't hide. We understand it's your birthday coming up on January
Oh my
14th.
gosh.
LinkedIn reminded me, so I thought that I would embarrass you and make everybody here listening wish you happy birthday in the comment
Thank you.
feed.
Thank you.
But tell us something you're looking forward to, probably celebrating with family. I know you've had the opportunity around the holidays to do that, but something else you're looking to outside of work and something personal about yourself.
So here, something personal for me is it's my parents' 50th anniversary this year.
Hey, all right,
Um, my dad is a cancer survivor, so it's like a big deal for them and for me.
absolutely,
So I'm working to do something for them this summer to be determined. Somewhere nice and warm where they can enjoy their 50th anniversary. So
awesome.
I think that's and a few of us family members may even drop in to spend time with them. So it's something really important to me, just because it's a milestone, and kudos to my parents for being married 50 years and tolerating me for 48 of those 50. So
Outstanding. Well, listen, he's Gyner Ozgul. He's the CEO of Perimeter Roofing, a new post that he just took. He's an advisory board member of the Service Council. Too many contributions to list. I want to thank you for joining today's segment of the In Service podcast series. Today's session is recorded for those of you that want to reference it back or share it with their team. It will be available on our website, on social platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the other ones, X, etc. So hopefully you grab it. It becomes a good resource for you, and we'll see you on the next segment. And again, Happy New Year. I hope this year starts off with a bang for you and your organization. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, Gyner.
thanks, everybody.